First of all, thank you to Josh, the CreativeMornings team, for inviting me to come talk to you. Thank you all for getting up early in the morning. I told my fiance last night that I would get up early in the morning to go talk about work, and she goes, "Do they know you normally don't work before like 10 or 11 in the morning?" And I said, "Oh, gotta make an exception." So a bunch of really interesting things have already happened today since I got here, and I love the name tags that each of you filled out. I noticed a couple of patterns already. I noticed a bunch of people who wanted to be an artist when they grew up. Who wanted to be an artist when they grew up? A bunch of you, that's really cool. I met two people who wanted to be a garbage truck when they grow up. Not a garbage truck driver, they want to be the truck. Because as Mark said, if you don't know that when you're a little kid, you can't grow up into being something that's not a person, right? That's not obvious. I want to talk briefly about what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I think more than I even realized how that would inform how I got into what I do, because it's been a bit of a journey. I want to talk about work as a journey and a series of choices, because I think we hear, especially as creative people, we hear the line, do what you love, and you'll never work a day in your life. I think that's bullshit. And I think if you do what you love, you know what I'm talking about. So there's got to be more to it. I think a lot of it comes down to the things that we choose and what we can choose, and if we think about what we choose and what we work on, I think we can make work something that we love every day, even when we have to get up early in the morning to do it. So the first thing that I wanted to be when I grew up was a paleontologist. I think every little boy that was born in the 80s wanted to be a paleontologist when they grew up. And then in 1994, Steven Spielberg released a movie called Jurassic Park, and I realized how dangerous it could be to be a paleontologist. And I said, oh, can't do that. And then I started making my way into a career in magic. I performed magic, which when I do not do speaking and presentations, my family goes, yep, that makes sense. But wanting to be a magician, I actually built a business as a young teenager, doing magic shows for birthday parties, for schools, for events. And then for my bar mitzvah, one of my best friends got me tickets to see David Copperfield live in New York City. I was like, this is the coolest. He's like, I could be like that. And then I saw David Copperfield live in New York, and I was like, wow, magicians are really creepy. I can't grow up to be a magician. And then I found computers, and it seemed safe. I could be in my mom's basement, I could poke around inside, I could learn how they worked, and it sort of, I think, sparked for me a way to express my curiosity, a way to poke around, learn how things work, build things, make things work, fix things that are broken. And that led me to, as I started looking at college, which, by the way, I went to Drexel University. Right? Any Drexel grads here? All right, you graduated. Nice job. I did not. But I went to Drexel for two very specific reasons. One was I grew up in the sticks, and I wanted a place with sidewalks. I wanted a college campus that was in a city. And as I've learned since, Philadelphia happens to be one of the most amazing cities in the world. And to have a college campus embedded in that city was something that I knew I wanted, even if I didn't entirely know what that meant. The other thing had everything to do with work, because I had learned at an unusually young age that I learned best while I was working, right? While I was on the job, while I was figuring things out, I would actually create value for the world, for my customers, but I would also bring new knowledge into my brain, into my world being expanded. And I said, all right, I want a college experience that includes work. So Drexel's got this really cool co-op program, and I was like, sweet, 3 jobs before I graduate, get a chance to explore, try things. And my hunch was, and I was right about this, I would learn more on those co-ops than I would in the classroom. And anyone who's been through a co-op or an internship program, a good internship program, or I know there's some folks, some agencies in the city of Philadelphia that run apprenticeship programs, that was what I had in my head. I wanted an apprenticeship. I wanted to learn, not just by virtue of having a job, I wanted to learn from someone who was a professional, who was the expert. They were the one doing it every day. And so, all right, so I'm gonna put some pieces together for you so far. We've got, I wanted to do something with technology. I was building hardware and systems and computers and networks. I was looking at Drexel. Drexel had a pretty good business school with an information systems focus that I could do, and I said, okay, I'm going to go to school for business, because clearly that's important, so that I can do this thing that I love, so technology, as a business, and serve the world, right? And my first co-op, I got a job working for PNC Bank down in Wilmington. And I was met with my first major professional challenge. And that was that I was doing the work that I thought I loved, and I was surrounded by miserable fucking people. If you work in a bank, I don't know what it is about a bank, and I'm speaking in broad brushstrokes here, of course, but it was a world full of people who were just angry to be at work. And that did not resonate with me. And the saving grace in the 6-month co-op was I did have a boss who was tremendous. And I had team members who were tremendous. But every time I was sent out into the field, because it was my job to work with hundreds of employees across multiple buildings, I'd come back and I'd just want to bury my face in my hands and say, "What? This is terrible. I can't do this." And it was this is now the third time that I thought I wanted to do something and learned how bad it was, paleontology, magic, and now computers. But now I'm an adult and I'm supposed to know. What do I do? And so I remember coming off of that co-op and going, okay, I have a problem. The thing I thought I wanted to do, the thing I thought I would love, I was wrong. What do I do about this? And fortunately, I had a friend who was also in the co-op program, and he was working for an interactive agency here in the city of Philadelphia. At the time, it was called Refinery. Are you familiar with Refinery? So it's like refinery diaspora in the Philadelphia region. Many people, I guarantee you know of agencies and firms and businesses in Philadelphia that exist because people met at this company. And Joe worked for this company that was doing a broad range of things. They did some pharma stuff because you're in Philly, so you generally do some pharma stuff. They were doing business consumer entertainment, so we were building stuff with Motorola, Campbell Soup Company, but they were building stuff on the internet that people would actually use on the internet. And I said to Joe, Joe, your job sounds really cool. Is it hard? I don't know how to code. I've actively resisted learning how to code up to this point because in my brain, code is math. I'm bad at math. I'll be bad at code. And he goes, well, you're a fast learner. You can probably figure it out. Why don't you come in for an interview? I'll get an interview set up at this job because I think you'd really like it. So I thought about that in the context of the experience that I just had. I had a job that I thought I would love. I ended up hating it. Now I see a job that I'm pretty sure I won't like, but I have this co-op program, this opportunity to try something that maybe I will like it after all. And so I actually went in with that specific sales pitch. I went in for a job interview. First of all, I'll admit to all of you here that I cheated on the entrance exam so that I could even have the interview, right? Sometimes you gotta do that if you really want something. No one was getting hurt, and I would learn. But I got the interview and I sat down with the hiring manager and I said, look, Dave, I just went through this experience where I thought I was going to love a job and I ended up hating it, and it was largely because of the people. And talking to Joe about what this company is about, it seems to be about the people. You make websites, but you make them together. You work together. And every time I hear him talking about the work that he does, the teammates that he works with, and the people he learns from, and how you learn, and how you create together, even though the work sounds like something I won't be interested in, the way you work is interesting to me. And I would like this 6-month no strings attached opportunity to be proven that I might like this kind of work. They liked that pitch, they gave me the job. And I went from knowing zero about software development, knew no code, up until that point it had been all hardware and systems and networking and operating system stuff. I'd never written a lick of code in my life. I found myself surrounded by mentors. I found myself surrounded by what was tactically and technically a company, but it felt more like a family, right? It felt like a place where everyone was there to support each other's success, to help each other learn new things. And that was the polar opposite of the environment that I had at the workplace at the bank, right? So the environment itself, I think, was so important in me even taking advantage of the fact that I could learn how to write code, how to build things on the internet. It turned out that I love making things on the internet. I thought of myself as someone who couldn't do math, but it turns out that programming is a lot more like language than it is like math in a lot of cases. I never considered myself someone artistic, but I learned tools and methods to move pixels around, to make things that could interact that people could see and experience, and that felt really empowering. But most of all, I felt looked after. I felt like whatever work I was doing my best, not on my own, and not in spite of the people around me like it was the bank, but the best work I was doing was because of the people who were around me. And as sometimes happened, this company started to grow very quickly. As the company grew from, I would say like 60 employees or so when I started, to over 160 employees in less than a year, if you've been through something like that, you know what that starts to do to the culture. And we shifted from an environment where I could sit down at the table every single day for meetings, and I knew everybody, not just what they did, what their name was. I knew things about their family. I knew what they were doing. I knew where they went on vacation recently. And those dimensions of what made them made us better coworkers, made us produce better work together. We knew that we were actual people making work together, and the sum was greater than the parts. But as the company grew, almost every meeting I went to, there was some unfamiliar face. And often, they were barking orders. And that obviously started to have a negative effect on that culture, on that productivity, on that willingness and ability to collaborate. Because instead of being in a place where people feel safe, we were in a place where people felt like they were potentially being threatened. All that being said, this is still the best job I've ever had in my entire life. And as the company started to sort of come apart at the seams, I'm pretty sure I still have fingernails in the carpet. I did not want to leave. It was almost like Stockholm Syndrome at the time. I still held a torch for how great it was, even though the company was coming apart at the seams. I eventually left. Went to go work for a company called Empathy Lab that is now, EPAM, right here in Philadelphia. Another big force, is, again, part of the refinery diaspora. And we had pre-existing relationships with some of those people who I'd gotten to know at work. They started building that company. It was heading in a different direction than I wanted to go. And I said, I'm going to go out on my own, right? If you do creative work, and sometimes you get frustrated with the way work is going, you look outside and you go, some people out there are freelancing, I'm going to go hack it that way. And what happened was, upon going out on my own, I had the thing that I wanted most. I had the ability to choose what I was working on, who I was working with. I could focus on surrounding myself with that family again, right? Because I knew that was what helped me create the best work, and helped us create the best work. The problem with being an independent, the problem with being solo, is you don't have that family. And this is, for those of you who know about my work at Indy Hall, which I'll explain in just a second, is really where the genesis of the desire for something like Indy Hall to exist. So, to put a little pin in that for a second and then sidestep and explain who I am, and I've been talking for the last 10 minutes, and what Indy Hall is, for those of you who don't know, my name is Alex Hillman. I'm the co-founder of a co-working space and community down in Old City, Philadelphia, called Indy Hall. My business partner's here in the audience, Jeff. Say hi, Jeff. We're coming up on our 10-year anniversary in September of next year, which in 10 years, to been doing anything in my life for 10 years, is amazing to me. Indy Hall looks like a place to work. The only reason it looks like a place to work is because a lot of the people who came together to make it happen were people who did work together. But the fact that we work at desks and computers is only by virtue of the kinds of work that we do. To start connecting the dots between what Indy Hall is today and why Indy Hall exists in the first place is what I kind of want to leave you with today. And that's, for the last 10 years, from the very, very beginning, when Jeff and I first sat down, and actually before I even met Jeff, the goal was never to build an office. The goal was to take the things that I learned along the way about what creates the best place to work, what creates the best environment to work. And there's a lot of platitudes out there. I said one already, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. There's people designing amazing collaborative offices out there. We're in the Center for Architecture. Architects are going nuts for all different new patterns and designs for making the workplace more conducive to working together. But I think the key thing is much, much simpler and something that we can all do regardless of where we are in an organization or company. And that's to go back to caring about each other. And for the last 100, 150 years, I think that we've forgotten that work is not done in a vacuum, and more importantly, if work's not being done in a vacuum, it behooves us to actually care about the people who we're working with, working alongside. And the trust in relationships that came from the environments that I worked in leading up to this point starkly contrasted against the environments that did not have those trust and relationships, and how hard and horrible it was to get work done in that environment, said, I'm going to make it my life's mission to create environments. In some cases, that's a physical built environment. In some cases, that's an online community. In some cases, that's just broad networks throughout a city or the globe, where people actually take the time to get to know each other, trust each other, and that, as the foundation for work, changes the way we work together. Because it doesn't matter what you're working on, whether you love it or hate it. How many people left a job? I'm going to assume just about everybody. What's the one thing you remember about a job, whether you loved or hated that job? Most likely, it's your coworkers. One, maybe two, a whole bunch of them, rarely all of them. That's the thing, is you don't have to love all of your coworkers. And they don't all have to love you. That's not the goal. The goal is to make sure there's a little bit of time put in your day to have taken some care and consideration for the people you work alongside. And ideally, before you even need them. Right? A lot of times we think about collaboration only in the moment where we need something we don't have, right? How does that feel for the person we're approaching? So, to sort of wrap things up today and sort of make our way towards the Q&A, because I love Q&A personally because it's my opportunity to interact with all of you and find out what you care about and hopefully answer some questions that you're thinking about in your life and your work. I want you to think about that. I want you to think about when you go to your office today, think about a person who maybe you have interacted with before, but the relationship is atrophied a little bit. You don't know what's going on in their life. Go find out. And not for any other reason than to find out. And see how that changes your day. See how it changes their day. And start making that a habit. Make that a practice. It takes time. But if you're going to invest in something, I think that's time really, really well spent. Cool. Thanks. So we've got some time for Q&A. What can we talk about? Who's got a question or something you want to riff on? Don't be shy.
Well, really superficial question.
Absolutely.
How'd you come up with the name Indy Hall?
Oh, sorry?
How'd you come up with the name Indy Hall?
Sure, a great question. So the name Indy Hall actually came from same place everything great in our community came from. It came from one of our members. Early. Actually, the first time I publicly described what Indy Hall could be, not necessarily the place, but a center for an ecosystem where people could find each other. A lot of the focus was on the people. I really wasn't interested in place so much as people. And there was a woman in the room, her name was Lauren Galenter. She's still an active force in the Philadelphia creative community. Some of you may know her, she's awesome. One of the things she said in sort of reflection on the comment was that she loved that A, this was focused on the people, and B, it was focused on Philadelphia from the start. A big part of the mindset that I was in at the time, I said, I live in an amazing city that doesn't seem to know it yet. And it's a combination of we don't know it yet and the outside world doesn't know it yet, but taking a sense of pride and ownership over the city that we are and can become was a big part of that story that I wanted to create. And she saw that, and she said it would be really cool to call this something like Independence Hall, like a hall of independent people, but a riff on we'll call it the other, not the original, Independence Hall. And I was like, that's a great idea. Why Indy Hall instead of Independence Hall is because, as luck would have it, a year and change later when we ended up with a physical location, it was 2 blocks away from the other Independence Hall. People started getting kind of confused. One of my favorite stories is actually, we had a bus driver knock on our door with a school bus full of kids out the street and say, I don't think I'm in the right place. No, you're not. We also get, an unusual amount of mail from people in prison wanting to write Independence Hall. And I'm not entirely sure why they're doing that either, but we always write back and say thank you for your note. But yeah, that's the story of the name Independence Hall to Indy Hall. Awesome question. Yeah.
The question is, so much of what you do is interacting with people.
Yeah.
You need to develop relationships that aren't necessarily just business.
That's right.
First, so how do you balance work-life balance?
Sure.
Can you comment on work-life balance?
Yeah, so I can borrow another aphorism in that there's work-life balance, there's work-life integration. I believe more in the latter, but I also believe it's all on a continuum. For me, So I'm going to sort of read inside your question to where I think it's most applicable, both in context of what I just talked about and where it's made the biggest difference in my life and my career, and that of the people around me. When we think about relationships, we think about personal and professional relationships, right? I had a woman in South Korea after one of my workshops say, "You talked a lot about personal relationships, but what about work relationships?" And I said, "Are they different? And if they are different, who decided that?" So I think that a lot, if you think about work relationships, and for me, relationship is underscored with trust, right? Do I or do I not trust you? Work relationships are, I think, generally live in the what I'll call the -10 to 0 spectrum. Whether or not I choose to work with you is based on whether or not I believe you won't screw me, right? That's where most work comes from. Think about the language we use around work, negotiation and things like that. Like, work starts so adversarially, and then we have to decide, okay, I don't believe you're going to screw me. Now I feel that we're safe to work together. Whereas personal relationships exist more in the 0 to +10 scale, where it's, I'm not going to leave, something that I value, family, friends, close people, with people who I think are evil. And it's actually the other end. I need to know that I actively trust that person, who they are. I need to know the elements of their character, why I should trust them. So I posit, and sort of the thesis for what I talked about is, what happens when we take our professional relationships and we treat them with the same consideration of our personal relationships? They start looking more similar. And that's not to say that everyone you work with needs to be your friend, right? It's that everyone you work with, it's worth putting the work into trusting them the way you would trust a friend or a loved one. The benefit of that and how that plays out has helped me avoid countless mistakes, simply because I have that very beginning gate of, would I want to spend time with you even if we weren't working together? And by not placing myself in a situation where I work with somebody simply because I have to, the work that I do tends to be more successful, and it lets me weed out the stuff that is going to, keep me from doing the stuff that has the most potential. So, great question. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how the community has changed and the kind of people that come to Indy Hall over the last 10 years, especially with the rise of startups being much more of a thing.
Yeah. The profile of who works at Indy Hall is probably one of the most common questions we get, whether it's from people who are coming into tour, the press, other co-working spaces are trying to figure out who they serve. And I can say with confidence that when we were getting started, I made a pretty big mistake in that the people that I focused on the people I could most easily reach, which is not a mistake. The mistake is that was mostly young white dudes who build websites. And when you start with a room of young white dudes who build websites, you end up with a combination of worldviews and expectations that can be tough to undo. And I'm very, very thankful that early on in our community, some people showed up, saw through that, saw who we really were and what we were for. And for me, I think when I talk about community and culture, which is sort of these amorphous terms, we're not really sure what they mean, to make them concrete. Culture and community, which are sort of interchangeable words in a lot of ways, for me are the sum of the relationships and interactions between the people who are in an ecosystem. If they're not interacting, there's no community and there's no culture. Or it's a negative community, negative culture, that's the word. So having more different kinds of people in the community changes that equation in a very positive way. And another thing that we've learned along the way is that you tend to learn more from people who are less like you. But we're really bad at seeking people who are less like us, as I proved in my own actions. So we have certainly evolved from young white dudes who build websites. We've got almost perfect 50-50 split men and women, which I'm really, really proud of. It's easier for me to tell you what industries aren't there than what are, and that's really exciting. I was describing to somebody while we were having coffee before that an increasingly common occurrence is somebody comes in for a tour of Indy Hall, and what they do comes up, whether it's in the tour or after they join, and I find myself saying, that's a job? You can do that for a job? That's super cool. One of our newest members is a master plumber. We've got multiple attorneys. We've got lots of artists. The artist community is probably one of the most exciting, growing components of our membership. And I'm going to call them artists even though they might not call themselves artists. I think that's really important because, like many of you, they've got jobs that they do so that they can be artists. and for people to find each other on the parallels that are adjacent to the thing you do professionally has created an immense amount of value and camaraderie and support in the other dimensions of what makes people them. The people who I think succeed most and get the most value out of being a part of Indy Hall are curious, and I think that's certainly me projecting because those are the people that I want to be surrounded with, but I see that for a fact. That curiosity also leads to a desire to grow and evolve. The people who come to Indy Hall, regardless of what discipline they're in, are seeking a next level. I would say the people who get the most are the people who don't know exactly what that next level is. They're aspirational, but in a very curious way. It's not, I need to be there or else I'm a failure, right? They don't shoot the moon in a way that would set them up for failure. They're people who go, I know I can do more or better. I want to be exposed to how people do work, be inspired, be able to ask questions, and people grow more incrementally but consistently compared to, you mentioned startups. Startups are the vast minority of our membership. And the ones that are there, I would consider substantial outliers. And it's because of that cultural dissonance. When people are in a startup where they're like, I have an idea, I'm a fucking genius, and if we don't get there, the world's coming crashing down, that doesn't resonate. It's not practical, it's not realistic, it's not honest, and I think most importantly, it's not authentic. The people who come in, I would say, are we were talking about Troy, wherever Troy got to. That's Troy. We were talking about, early in my career, I surrounded myself with craftsmen and women from the web industry. And I think that I look at Indy Hall, and these are the craftsmen and women of whatever their trade are. They focus on high quality relationships, connection to their customers, that value what they put into the world. But the exact discipline they do it in, I'm consistently impressed and surprised by who shows up. One last thing that I'll add to that's been the most exciting and surprising has been, I'll say two, actually, students. Currently mostly grad students because they see us sort of as a better version of their library. You can soak up the positive energy rather than people who are like crying. They're like, this is way better than the library or wherever they're currently doing their studying. So students are great, and I would like to reach deeper in that, get some undergrad, get some high school. When students come through Indy Hall and they see this environment full of people who are working in a way that is not only better than they imagined, but a complete blind spot for them. They could not imagine that if you're an adult, you can work like this, you can dress like this, you can talk like this, you can act like this. You are responsible for your own destiny. That is mind-blowing for a high schooler, middle schooler. We had a group of sixth grade girls from an all-girls school from the suburbs come in, and they got it instantly. They didn't have the world of work to unpack before they could understand what Indy Hall was about. And when they went back to their classroom, they rearranged their classroom to be more like Indy Hall. That was so cool. And those girls are going to grow up to do something amazing. I'm 100% sure of it. The other very interesting thing are people who have full-time jobs in companies that have offices elsewhere in the city. As I mentioned before, we don't always love our coworkers, or we are not always the most productive around our coworkers, because in every office there's people that don't want to be there, or that, maybe they seem like they want to be there, but you can tell they're faking it, right? Indy Hall is an amazingly unique environment where everyone is there by choice, including the staff. We've designed our hiring model around people being there because they want to be there, instead of it just being a job. When you have a job and the environment doesn't provide you with that, it's become our tagline. Indy Hall is better coworkers in a lot of ways. These are people who are not going to interrupt you because they need something. If they're going to interrupt you, it's to inspire you, to share something with you, to help make your day better, as well as a place where you can have control over how your day is going to go. The people who choose to work or even be connected to Indy Hall, start thinking of Indy Hall more as a professional association for a realistic aspirational makers, if you will, across lots of industries. Professional club of sorts with a clubhouse. I think what Indy Hall actually is starts to make a whole lot more sense. So our future, our next 10 years, I'm focused super heavily on that, and making our community not feel like if you're not physically in the place, you're not getting value out of it, because we know that our members, 80% of our members are not there full time, 60% of our members are there once a month or less, and they pay a monthly membership and are thrilled to do it. because they get a ton of value out of it. So we need to do a better job of communicating that to the outside world and say, look, for 20, 30 bucks a month, you can join this community, be a part of this community, be more connected in a professional sense, and a social sense, all in one. And by the way, if you need a place to work once in a while, the clubhouse at the front door is open for you as well. So, awesome question. Yeah, here.
As a Gen Xer, growing up in a very hyper individualistic workplaces where people saw other people as a means to advance themselves, it's really refreshing, first off, as you say that.
Thank you.
To see your vulnerability, to open yourself up to collaboration and see, how you can serve others, and that's really impressive and refreshing and inspiring to see. But the question I have is, so before you had your building, you built community.
That's right.
And you sought to get this diverse community. So how did you go about building a diverse community? When typically we surround ourselves with people who are like us, you were seeking to do the opposite. So you're not actually in these other circles where you're trying to draw people in. How did you build that community apart before you had a building to get eventually to a place where you needed a physical space to house that community?
Yeah. So building a community before there is a physical place is something that a lot of co-working spaces struggle because they don't follow that path, because they open. I'm going to explain sort of why that doesn't work, and then I'll get into answer your question. If you you set up a room, you make it look really nice, you put some tables and chairs, Wi-Fi, conference rooms, and coffee, and the assumption is people are walking around going, man, I wish there was a co-working space to go to. You're very, 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 very wrong. That was even more wrong 10 years ago before anybody knew what a co-working space was. Even now people do know what they are, it's just not in their mind. It's not something they're actively seeking most of the time. So you make that even worse when that room is empty, right? Every person who walks in sees an empty room. Who wants to be the first person to sit down in an empty room or at an empty cluster of tables? It undermines the point. Those people aren't coming there for anything other than the fact that they need to be around other people, and there's nobody there, and you've got a problem. So what we learned, I'll admit, by accident, but now in hindsight, seeing it compared to lots of struggles and how difficult it is when you start with an empty room and now you have to bootstrap community inside of it. It's actually easier to build community when you don't have a dedicated place to go. That's counterintuitive. Let me explain how. So if you start with a place, it's about getting those people to come to that place, right? And that's a lot of work. I like an analogy of dating. Most first dates don't happen in the bedroom. Most. But when we are trying to build a community, we essentially create the first date in our house. And we're wondering and surprised when people are a little apprehensive to come over. I wonder, should we be so surprised? So step number one, and rule number one is go outside. And in 2006 in Philadelphia, there was no meetup.com. We had things like PANMA, Philadelphia Area New Media Association, which is now probably a 20-plus-year-old organization. 2025, anybody know? That was a massive watering hole of people that could potentially be kindred spirits. And I started getting active in that community as a participant, not as a leader or someone who desires to start a new one. I got active. And that's step one, is to find communities, get active in them, just like you would in your own. And you don't need to like everybody. You don't need to get along with everybody. I made it my goal every time I went to an event or every time I had an interaction to walk away with one meaningful relationship that came from one. I may have 10 or 20 conversations, but there's that one where I was like, that was cool. I'm looking forward to next time I get to talk to that person. That was my clue. I didn't really know it at the time, but in hindsight, I can say that was definitely worth my time. And my hope was that they were walking away thinking the same thing too. We'd exchange information, and instead of it being how many business cards can I collect, it was how do I get one contact for someone who I'm actually genuinely looking forward to having coffee or going to the next meetup together, because that was the next step. I would start taking that small collection of people and say, hey, I found a new thing we can go to. Anybody want to go with me? Right? And that evolved. And as we started showing up at other people's events as a group of people, sometimes even casually under the name of Indy Hall, the conversation could start, 4 or 5 of you seem to know each other. How do you know each other? And they would say, oh, we're part of this community, Indy Hall. It's people that we're independent, but we're feeling kind of lonely and want to come together. And that would really resonate with some people, and sort of they would want to join up as well. A lot of this was happening on a Google group, on an email discussion list. It was really, really simple. It was not until, so I'm going to give you a timeline, September 2006 to March or April of 2007, it was that, over and over and over, every week. You don't have to do it every night of the week. I did because I'm insane. But you can do, I've advised a bunch of people in more recent years, go one night a week. You got a busy schedule, you got family, you got homework, whatever it is, one time. We're good? All right, last question, I'll wrap this up. Make it your goal to end each week having added a new relationship in your local community. And then keep following up and treat it as an additive process instead of disconnected interactions. That led to us hosting our own work-based meetups where instead of going to a cafe by ourselves, I would say, I'm going to this cafe on this day at this time, who can join me? And that would grow from 2 to 3 people to 5 to 6 people to, by the time we were actually talking about having a physical place, there was 20 plus people who were coming on a regular basis to go to a cafe. And even though the chairs weren't comfortable, the Wi-Fi would go out and the barista would glare at us all day long, that was still better than being alone. And then being able to do that every day was a very clear path for a lot of those people. Not everybody, but a lot of those people to want to, if not have a place to work, to know that there's a clubhouse where they can go and find those people and bring more people to. And that process has really just cycled over and over and over for a decade. And I don't see us changing that. That's the beautiful part. We're working on some really big, exciting stuff in the next 10 years, but we're starting by going back to roots and having the same basic patterns, starting with relationships. At even the hard stuff where you would normally ignore that, the real estate work I've been doing for the last 6 months, I went back to that. I talked to everybody, but I refused to talk about the deal. If they only wanted to talk about the deal to start, I was like, you know what, this is great, but I think I got to go. The people who wanted to find out who we were, what we were about, and were, and that's exactly what's panned out. So consistency is super important. But I got to wrap things up. Thank you all so much for coming out this morning.